Welcome to the Wave Podcast.
We tell the stories of life. The wave, the wave, the wave, the wave.
In a 2018 interview at the Marché International du Disque et de l'Édition Musicale, or MIDEM Music Festival, Michael Ugu, General Manager of Sony Music Entertainment for West Africa, stated that in his view, Africa has that sound of the future. Indeed, Africa is abounding with musical talent. Artists from the continent have tended to start on the underground music scene and then have gone on to gain a local following that propels them to international fame. This was the case with the rise for Afrobeats artists such as the pioneering twins P-Square and Don Jazzy. Of course, we cannot ignore the role played by the Nigerian diaspora in facilitating this leap from local to global. Their very presence in different countries at least contributed to bringing these sounds to the reach of new listeners. Today, African musicians are experimenting with alternative and hybrid beats. They are boldly reimagining the building blocks of established musical styles such as jazz, pop, hip-hop, and traditional African music, thereby producing new rhythms and sounds. However, little is known of this type of African music. Why is this? The first challenge relates to the risks that major record companies are willing to take to invest in new talent. These labels play a decisive role in the distribution of music on and from the continent, and they alone possess the means to support and amplify new sounds because they have the required access to networks for distribution and budgets dedicated to publicity. For example, Marvin Records by Don Jazzy is known for having taken this sort of risk. 10 years ago, when Afrobeats was still a marginal genre on the global scene, only very rarely did record labels invest in this rising phenomenon. Then Marvin Records began to support Afrobeat artists. Today, the major record labels are competing avidly to sign Afropop creators. The essential requirement is to convince record companies to invest in the sounds and artists of the future, irrespective of temporary metrics such as the numbers of views or downloads. Certain record companies are beginning to recognize this and are starting to specialize in alternative music styles. This was the case for the French Naive Records, which has invested in the careers of Asha and Youssou N'Dour. The second challenge relates to the artistic independence of creators who choose to pursue an alternative path. Being taken on by a major label often comes with accepting the artistic direction imposed by the label with a view to effective commercialization. Many artists conform to the demands of their record companies and accept changes to their work in order to adapt to the market realities they face. In America, this happened with the singer Kiara. First embracing the style of crunk and B, she eventually migrated away, only to return to the pop music that marked her original music identity. This did not sit well with her label, which quickly put an end to her contract. In Africa, many artists have preferred to invest in their music themselves, which requires a considerable source of funds, with a view to first establishing a fan base that might then allow them to insist on their style with a record label. Such was the case with the Congolese singer Fally Ipupa at the start of his career. A preliminary solution to overcome these impediments and barriers to entry on the African music market could be to sign contracts for the writing of songs and to propose these to already established artists. The latter are the ones setting the trends. This is how Tiwa Savage was able to exert her influence over 10 years ago when she was writing songs for Sony Publishing intended for American celebrities. Today, we are hosting artists who choose not to follow mainstream trends. They will speak to us about the challenges they face, the reality of the music markets on the continent in which they work, and the solutions they propose. We are also joined by a representative of an African music label who hopefully can give us an insight into their strategies regarding emerging artists. A preliminary solution to overcome these impediments and barriers to entry on the African music market could be to sign contracts for the writing of songs and to propose these to already established artists. After all, the latter are the ones setting the trends. This is how Tiwa Savage was able to exert her influence over 10 years ago when she was writing songs for Sony Publishing intended for American celebrities. Today, we are hosting artists who chose not to follow mainstream trends. They will speak to us about the challenges they faced, the reality of the music markets on the continent in which they work, and the solutions they propose. We are also joined by a representative of an African music label who hopefully can give us an insight into their strategies regarding emerging artists.
The wave, the wave, the wave.
Today we are discussing alternative or mainstream and pathways to success in the African music industry, right? So, we all know that there are so many kinds of African music, 54 countries in one continent. So different sounds, different languages. It's full of drumming, it's full of dancing, it's pulsating rhythms of the earth. And African music is a celebration, exaltation, and a profound visceral way of communicating. Today on The Wave, we are discussing all types of music across Africa that are little known, but nevertheless, their existence is known. My name is Charlotte Bonner. I am a Kenyan with over 5 years experience in the music industry. I am currently the head of business development and media partnerships at Ojomac Africa. For those who don't know Ojomac is an American youth-driven artist-first music streaming platform that provides artists with a space in which they're able to effortlessly share their music with the world, and that provides listeners with an amazing listening experience that is focused on discovery and exploration. I am delighted to welcome members of my panel today. Ninal Musan, who is not only a senior executive, but one of the only female co-founders of a record label and creative entertainment management agency on the continent. As a formidable entrepreneur, over the last decade, Ninel has transformed a unique music startup and talent management agency with an enviable roster of Africa's most well-known music talent, including Emi Faku, aka Manu Walster, Benny Afro, Courtney, Paul, Promenade, Stepdaddy, Eternal Africa, and others. Ninel, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
The second person on the panel is Kobams with us.
Yes, Kobams is with us. And It's a
Awesome.
pleasure to be here.
It is a pleasure, Kobams. Kobams Asuko is a Nigerian singer-songwriter and music producer. In 2005, he was signed to Sony ATV London as a songwriter after working as head of audio production at Question Mark Entertainment in Lagos, Nigeria. He set up his own label and recording facility, Kobams Asuko Music Production, also known as CAMP. Love it. In 2006. He rose to international acclaim in 2007 as the lead music producer and co-writer for Asha, the award-winning self-titled album by Nigerian soul sensation Asha, who at that time was signed to Naive Records in France. Kobams, you're such a legend, and I am happy to have you with us today. Welcome.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
And on the third panelist is Gigi Atlantis, a Nigerian songwriter, singer-songwriter. She has made a remarkable debut in the music industry with her song Wahala on the Rocks, which quickly became a radio hit in Nigeria in 2020. She has also collaborated with artists such as Borj and Odunsi. Gigi produces her own songs and distributes her own song and demonstrates vividly the life of alternative genre music in Africa. So Guys, I really want to, sorry, Gigi, welcome. Please say hi to the people.
Hi.
Hi, Gigi.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. So I want to jump right into it. First of all, let's talk about the pandemic and just how it has um, affected your business and affected the music industry generally. Funny enough, I was reading the IFPI report that said that recordings and streaming earnings and recordings globally have shot up. But it was when I was reading the report, um, there was a gross underrepresentation of Africa and just what like Africa contributed to the global entertainment industry. You guys, how the pandemic affected your business. So Ninel, do you want to go first?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it's shifted the music industry completely. And I guess we dealt with the shock of it and did what we could at the beginning, but now we're a year in. So, actually, I don't think we thought we would have to cope with this reality for a year. But we have, and I think while a lot of other businesses and other sectors have been also affected, and there's so many businesses that aren't in business anymore, we're still here. And as a small agency and a small independent record label, we're really grateful to still, be around and still be moving forward. The greatest impact to music was obviously live. And so because we're a hybrid business, independent record label and talent management agency, no live, no shows, no tours. It affects the mood of the artist to not be on stage, not see their fans and connect with their audiences, but affects their baseline revenue as well. For most of our artists, that's between 60 to 80% of their revenue. And so it's gone, it's been wiped out. And in South Africa, now that we're on a lower level of lockdown, we have some smaller shows where there are some opportunities coming through, but it's a lot less than before. We've had live stream opportunities and digital shows, which we've contended with over the period of the last year. They haven't been the same. It's definitely not matched with our usual live business. But it's been a major, major, major impact. Some of the good things that happen, and I mean, it reflects in the report that you just mentioned, Charlotte, is that, overall global music sales and streams have increased. And one of the best parts that I think also happened, which hopefully we can discuss later in the show as well, is that I think lockdown provided an opportunity for discovery for a lot of new artists, from listeners that were looking for new music online. And I think that could be, that should lead to a couple more opportunities. I think we're already seeing it.
I want to jump in right there and just say that for on my end as a DSP, and just the numbers that we're seeing on AudioMac, has people, the way people consume music has definitely changed during this pandemic for sure. And there was like people were just thirsty for more, if that's the word to say, and they're just looking for fresh sounds and fresh faces. I'd have to say that um I think I would like to mention that I feel like the impact on on um on this pandemic, on the African continent and generally the music that's coming from Africa, has really been positive in just in terms of making more African superstars, and just recognizable worldwide. But Kabams, I would like to go to you and you just get your opinion as well on how this pandemic affected the business from your end and what you think the pros were and the cons were, on the continent.
So the pandemic has been a major disruptor, in my opinion, and it has come with a mixed bag of opportunities as well as challenges. From a personal point of view, one of the things that I find very interestingly revealing is the amount of collaborations that have been able to happen even in the middle of the pandemic. So as a recording artist and as a producer, It also sort of provided, in a very weird sense, an opportunity to collaborate with a lot of artists across the continent. I happen to, in my capacity as a UNICEF ambassador and also doing some work for One Foundation, work on a number of materials to sensitize people on basically how to manage and carry themselves during the pandemic. And a lot of these collaborations were done remotely, across countries. And I think that that's something we've sort of been pushed, by the, like the last speaker mentioned, sort of just been pushed to do. We've been introduced to new faces, and new styles. We've had obviously a bit more time on our hands, and we've just sort of enjoyed and appreciated different genres of music. At least I know I have. But I think for me, one good takeaway is the collaborative efforts, and the collaborative relationships that have been forged, through this time. Obviously, revenues have been affected, out here in Nigeria, as well as everywhere else, and people are just sort of slowly getting back to. But also, I think another thing was just opening people to the possibility of paid shows that can happen from the comfort of your home. And I found that to be very interesting and very revealing. I know that there were a number of YouTube features. Udu X, which is a streaming platform based out of Nigeria, actually did have some of those features and had the likes of Asha and Davido and so. I mean, it did come with a lot of its challenges in terms of the live music scene, which is where a lot of musicians have suffered revenue loss. But I think it also opened a lot of opportunities in terms of collaborative efforts, and also in terms of other means of sort of generating revenues outside of just live music performance, and even outside of just streaming. So in terms of live performances, and I even more recently, there's been a lot of talk about other tokens that musicians can sort of, or artists can use as tender for their material. I know that things like that have sort of been, basically fintech has merged with different art forms to create opportunity for value and monetization. And that's really a disruptor, if you ask me.
That's really awesome, Gigi. I'm gonna ask you to piggyback on what Kobab has said. You are an artist, singer, songwriter. What opportunities do you think have come your way with the pandemic, and what are some of the cons as well?
Well, I think that a lot of opportunities have arisen during the pandemic and lockdown, with regards to technology-based performance and podcast and a lot of app work. It's taken the social aspect of music and shows to social media, and so that platform, that area has just exploded. But as a setback, I find it's restrictive and it's very specific when you're talking about performing on social media, and it's not really for everyone. Not every artist loves the social media area and fixates on it as much. And so that kind of, if you draw back from that, I feel like maybe you're not really with it as much as the next artist might be. I find that social networking and understanding people's vibes and getting to know people and then choosing to work with them then works for me, if that makes any sense. The flow has just been scrambled by the whole pandemic in a sense, but at the same time, it's given everyone time to take a step back, look at what they want to do, actually understand where their art is coming from and how they feel about it and what truly is expression, I guess.
Are we looking at any collaborations, Gigi? If you got the chance to work with other artists from different parts of the continent, is that something that you're willing to share?
Yeah, of course, collaborations are always going on. When people reach out or you reach out and you make things, but the pandemic has slowed down the whole polishing and packaging process in a sense. You can't really just go out and shoot visuals without endangering the herd with the virus. So I'm taking steps and precautions and taking time to wait for things to be right, and then everyone will know.
No pressure. We're ready when you're ready. I'm just gonna jump ahead to the next topic. We recently saw Burna Boy win a Grammy, which was such a big deal, especially in the continent. Just like, oh, we're seeing an Afrobeat artist, winning a Grammy, and I think we've wanted inclusion for the longest time. So I think I want to know how you guys feel, first of all, in just like music from Africa just being classified as Afrobeat and us going or being represented in, would I say the world music category? Would what's your opinion on that?
I think it's great that, I mean, that's a huge accolade, a Grammy. It's the ultimate accolade for many artists around the world, and it's great that we got to celebrate 3 times over this year. It's a remarkable achievement for those artists. I think, it's great that Afrobeats is being highlighted and that, it's being awarded and getting the recognition that it deserves as a great genre of music from Africa. It's of course not the only kind of music from the continent. You opened by speaking about 54 countries. In South Africa, we have 11 different languages, and each artist needs to be able to represent themselves, their culture, their heritage in the art that they create. And I think that it's very important that over time we create more platforms for that music to be heard and to be celebrated as well. It's part of, I think, what will be authentic for music from here. I think for a long time, African music has inspired a lot of other genres of music in the US and Europe. I think we can hear the same patterns, the same rhythms, but it wasn't being acknowledged as African music. And so for the most part, I think it is progress. The category of world music, yeah, so that was a big topic even for the fans on social media, and of course as an industry as well. We have to take care of these categories and these labels. Whose label is that world music? How do we want to own that label, or how do we want to be able to filter it or change it going forward? There's a lot of people that say that music genres aren't, they're evolving over time, as music should, as trends should. But you still have to pick a genre. Nowadays, if you sell music on a digital service platform like Apple, you have to be able to pick your genre up front and decide, okay, this is what I'm being classified as. And we didn't create those genres either, but we have to fall into them. And then, if you want to be on a chart, you're in a chart in that genre, for example. So I think there's a lot around categorization and genre that we need to discuss. And we have to discuss where those genres are coming from. And if we need to amend it, clearly that change needs to come from us. It needs to come from the artists here and from the organizations here, the industry, the labels, and so forth. But let me pause there for thoughts, if you don't mind, and I can circle back with feedback afterwards.
No problem, no pressure. I think I'd like to just agree with you and just say that, just the world recognizing Afrobeat for, regardless of not recognizing the other genres, is a start for us. And, we just kind of just have to keep pushing the other genres that we have. But this is a good beginning. But Kabab, I'd really like to hear your thoughts on and especially because I think Asha, I wouldn't classify her as Afrobeat because her genre is different, but like she's a world renowned artist. So what's your thought on just like, music being classified as Afrobeat?
So I'm going to agree very strongly with you, and on the subject. Of course, Afrobeat definitely is taking center stage and we in a sense have the ears of the world, and And that's a great start. But I think what we all seem to be saying in unison here is it's gradually becoming time to deepen the conversation past just accepting one genre of music. But I think that if history sort of is repeating itself, because when you think Jamaica, you think the Caribbeans, there's often the association with reggae. I mean, in some cases, yes, there's maybe soca or calypso, but the bigger representation seems to be reggae, in a sense, and I feel like that might be what is happening with us and Afrobeats. I think for me, I would further the conversation to say, now that we're beginning to have the ears of the world, how do we begin to deliberately introduce other genres? So yeah, while we agree that there are many different genres, I think the system that sort of pushes out the music in this space, so by that I mean the gatekeepers, from value-added service providers to radio to TV to video to all of that, kind of invest in what appeals to the masses. And I think that that's where Afrobeat sort of has it going. I think that people have not been able to confidently express confidence in differing palettes, if you will. And because of that, because there's great music, all over Africa, this great, from Salignolo to Tikenja to Rokia Traore to the Zamajobes and Fiwe Dana. I mean, there's just a ton of people who make great music. I think that, part of what we also need to do, while the Grammy nomination and winning is important, I think we need to begin to consider, the importance of parallel systems that sort of celebrate. Because when you think about it, the Grammy is actually, it's a moment. That's what it is for us. It's kind of a short moment that happens and goes away. It's like they change the channel very quickly. But I think what's going to linger is creating a credible, respectable parallel system that recognizes the different genres of African music that's coming out of this space. That's also done, in a international standard. We can get corporates to sort of invest in growing it to be a credible way of validating music in Africa. I feel like we need to come to a point where we're having our own conversation, celebrating our divergent genres, but also sensitizing people in terms of understanding that you can't just put money behind, corporates can't just put money behind mass appeal, so I think it's a matter of accountability, and all of that. There's all kinds of grants and all kinds of trusts and all kinds of, that protect, the interest of jazz music and what have you. But, you can't move music without money. You can't recognize a genre, build a genre or whatever, without, the financial support. So I think, there needs to be a business conversation along with an art conversation in terms of how all these other genres, because there are people who appreciate them, but we just aren't consolidating the silent majority. And I think that when we can consolidate the silent majority, we can actually show the world that there is more to African music than Afrobeats. I love Afrobeats, by the way, but like you said, Asha cannot be classified as Afrobeats, at least not at this time. And I feel that there are many other artists aside herself, from Buika to, just name it, who are worthy of note and worthy of recognition. And I feel like that will come as we begin to create our own credible parallel systems.
I was just going to agree with you, Cobhams. I mean, I'm a fan of Afrobeats as well. And, I can remember when it started infiltrating in South Africa as well. Which was in the recent sort of like 5-6 years. And it meant that, and one of the most important things that I think happened was artists recognizing the music and wanting to collaborate. And I think that was important for the music coming out of West Africa to be able to spread to the South and become popular here. And I think when I mentioned music discovery for fans, we spoke about it even for ourselves, I discovered new artists and new music because there was a little bit more bandwidth to do that when so many other activities within the industry were slowed down or halted. And I think artists on my level discovered other artists as well that they wanted to feature and collaborate with. And because there was no travel, communicating with somebody within your own country and communicating with somebody from Kenya or Nigeria or Ghana, it was equivalent. So it was much easier to share a beat, have a listen, send back a verse, spend some time writing together online. And I don't think we had that focus before. And so I think this is one of the really novel things that happened during lockdown and because of the pandemic. And maybe it would have happened anyway, but I feel like it was a little bit sped up because we had that capacity to do that. And I think those collaborations are what is important for music to grow from local to bigger than that. And I think even as far as internationally into the US and into the Grammys, if we can open up the minds, or just as the way that we've become more open-minded, I think within the continent, to be able to collaborate and work more with each other as producers or songwriters or performing artists and recording artists, I think the same thing needs to happen for artists that are based in the UK, Europe, and the US, to say, when you're thinking about a great sound to work on, or with an artist to collaborate on, we don't only have to look within the genre, we can also look at the others. In South Africa, the dominant genre right now is amapiano, obviously. And, a lot of the stuff, we actually released, one of the ambassadors for amapiano from South Africa right now is an artist called Focalistic. And we released that album during April, which is at the height of lockdown year. And all the work that we could do for promo at the time was digital. But we reached out to, even radio outside of South Africa and Kenya and so forth to be able to push the music forward. And I think there was an openness because the timing was right for this kind of music. But I think also there was this desire to, it was a new sound, it was something fresh. And so I think that same process can be applied to a lot of other music genres as well, in Afro pop, Afro soul, and so forth.
If I can just say that I'm happy you mentioned amapiano, because I think in terms of proper nomenclature, and I'm sorry, Charlotte, this looks we're just jumping in, but so amapiano, which originated from South Africa, and it's such a big sound, has become just humongous in the Nigerian space. But it's interesting how that's by itself is a respectable genre, but it's sort of been subclassed under Afro beats. And so for me, I think, this sort of underscores the importance of, getting to a point where, there is like a parallel system that recognizes the effort, and the ingenuity of creating, a genre that's able to drive, music and drive tastes and all that. I mean, we wouldn't do that. You wouldn't take EDM, for instance, and just, log it under pop or something. You know what I mean? So, it's such a fantastic genre that is, everyone's got I'm working on a collaborative album, and I can tell you a number of amapiano songs we've got on it, from Davido to Burna Boy, name it. Everyone has got an amapiano track. So I'm just saying, it just underscores the importance of just sort of respecting the different genres and then giving them room to thrive, as opposed to just sort of logging everything under the Afrobeats genre.
Yeah. And I think because this genre, this is a great example of a genre that it's very localized, and it was, it really comes from, this wasn't created by an A&R department from a record label, okay? This is from people, this is from the streets, this is from the people. And the entire sound and authenticity of that is actually what I think resonates with people when they hear it for the first time, and why they latch onto it, and why I think it's growing so fast. And it comes from other South African genres that I think predated it. Well, I mean, there's debate about that, but Kwaito, for example, you can hear some of it in there, which is one of, so that's a very old, very well-established South African genre. But those are our names for those genres. It comes from here. And you're right, it goes into an Afrobeat playlist, or worse, it goes into a list with just all other African music right now. And I don't know, I mean, I'd like to have your thoughts on that. Is that good? Because that means that we're moving into a bit of a genre list where it's just about music that suits a mood, which is how consumers are experiencing, wanting to listen to recorded music right now and on playlists. Or do we fight to maintain the classification of our music here, because that is its name, that's how the artists describe their music, and that's what it should be. So if it does get to the Grammys one day, we keep the name amapiano, pianos, or does it need to be reclassified by some global committee? Which is it?
Just to jump in here, I really love this conversation. First of all, just congratulations on Focalistic. I think he's done amazing, and I think my favorite is the remix with Davido. Um, but I think I'd like to say, in terms of the question that you have asked, in terms of like how then do we make sure that this sound goes global as I'm a piano and not Afrobeat, and because you find that from a DSP perspective that this song will be placed on an Afrobeat playlist here and there and there. I think one thing I'd like to point out is that when we get music from a lot of artists, it's always, I'm requesting to be on this playlist and I'm requesting to be on that playlist. And most of the time they will see a playlist that has 61 million plays or 70 million plays or 100 million plays, the most popular playlist. And if you find that from a service provider perspective, we're trying to build a piano playlist, for example, and try and kick it off. And what we then need to do is put that song on that piano playlist and then send the artwork to the artist and say, listen, we've added you to this piano playlist. So you should send your fans to check it out on this piano playlist so that we can just generally try and start building that playlist and in turn build that genre for the world. But at the end of the day, the artist is always saying, no, I want to be on this verified Afrobeat playlist because this is the bigger playlist. And I'm happy to share this verified Afrobeat playlist. I was saying in terms of globalizing different genres from across the continent and giving an example of piano, from a service provider perspective, when artists submit songs to the DSP and to different service providers, they always know what playlist they want to be added to, and they kind of like are adamant on requesting, I want to be added to this playlist and that playlist. And most of the times they choose the playlist that is more popular and that has more plays. So whatever playlist has 100 million plays, that's a playlist that they want to be added to. And so then you find that we're having this discussion where we're like, okay, cool. Piano is growing as a genre on its own, and we're trying to kind of just build that and make it more recognizable to the world on its own as a genre that comes from Africa, that's not Afrobeat, but called Amapiano. So you build a new playlist and place different Amapiano songs on this new playlist, this Amapiano playlist, and you send the artist the artwork and say, listen, I've added you to this Amapiano playlist. Do you mind sharing with your fans? And they're like, no, but I'm willing and I'm happy to share, if you add me to this verified Afrobeat playlist that's really, really big, they're happy to share that. But they're not happy to share the new playlist that is an Amapiano playlist just because it's not big enough, because essentially we're still trying to build it. So how do we make the artist understand that it's not necessarily us building this playlist, but it's us building this genre?
Okay, so I was sort of speaking to that and saying that one of the reasons I think why, and then from personal experience, why artists choose certain playlists they want to be on is, because they are very well aware of their existential reality. And the existential reality is that it's a game of numbers. It comes down to having as many numbers as you can. And I feel like, this is usually controlled by again, it comes back to the gatekeepers. I think that there are a lot of external influences that control the music that we create and then the music that people consume. And I feel like, until we're able to address some of these issues, from the root perpetrators, if you will, or causes, if you will, we're going to continue to have these sort of struggles. And also to speak to, it just sort of segues nicely to Ninel's question, about do we sort of make it open-ended in terms of genres and just have like a genre-less space? So I think, first of all, that, it would be important for this reason to have genres, but also important to, I think, regulation. So for instance, one of the things that happened in Nigeria for many years was a lot of the music was foreign influenced. And then, of course, we had like NBC regulations that would stipulate that, 20% local, 80%, 20% foreign, 80% local. And I think that as these things are managed from a regulatory perspective, you can then sort of, when people know that, there are incentives, there are grants, there's whatever it is, that can sort of incentivize them to hold on to their genres, because we can't all sort of be victims of the same taste. And the taste is generally what? It's generally mass appeal. It's generally popular music. We all want to hear different things. And sometimes, if we go into this wide open space, we encounter a lot of thorns to get to our roses. And so I think we need to start having conversations not regulatory conversations in terms of how you regulate what people enjoy, because you can't get in the way of people's freedoms. I don't think that's what it is. But in terms of how these other genres can enjoy the benefits that, say, Afrobeats by itself sort of enjoys, so sort of a focus of, South Africa on Amapiano. Like, I mean, what happened with, South African house? At a point in time, it was becoming a big thing and even filtering into the Nigerian space. Dubstep at a point became a big thing and filtered all over the world. Trap became a big thing and filtered all over the world. So how is it, what are the models that sort of help these genres become what they are and filter, all over the world? And how can we adopt these models and personalize them for genres so that artists can feel that, look, we have a playlist of 50 million or 60 million people, but it's 50 or 60 million people who actually care about our kind of music, or maybe 10 million people, but 10 million people who are devoted to our kind of music, so that you're able to build a cult following and you're able to even do merchandising and everything else based on that. So I think it's about having a conversation around the science and the regulation that protects the interests of people who create music, for different genres. I think it's important that, we continue to keep, genres going, because people are able to zero in on what's most important to them. And I also think that it's important for us to have, science and regulation conversations around how these playlists can better serve, maybe a smaller audience in some cases, but a more devoted, more cult following.
Gigi, you've been silent, and I also think that your music is also different. What's your take in all this, and just in terms of classifying and just putting out the alternative sound and globalizing it?
In terms of classifying, I feel like it's not something that needs to be focused on in such an analytical way, because there will always be classifications. People are just generally conditioned to stereotype. And, I mean, I was writing down some notes actually. And I was saying that there are so many categories that exist on the continent, and such a variety of classification is possible, that it really depends on the person who's consuming it, I think, because there will always be people who are looking for like a refreshing aspect in art, or who like to be individual and like to discover new things and like to digest and analyze it themselves and share it with their friends, and not just have a prepackaged idea in their minds that they choose to debate based on bullet points that they've drawn from elsewhere. And again, art is just very fluid. That, to me, thinking about classification is analysis paralysis, and it gets me stressed. But I don't think that everyone is as influenced by platforms as some people like to be directed in their sense of taste, of course. But again, other people pride themselves on the discovery of new music and artists and scenes and feeling.
I think my next question to you is, do you think mainstream media, Cobams mentioned that there's regulations, at least in Nigeria. I haven't heard this in Kenya or Ghana, but there's regulations in Nigeria that says 80% local and 20% foreign. And my question is then, do you think that mainstream media, radio stations and TV are like heeding this campaign to play more local music, but also including alternative sounds, or do you think they're playing local, but they're playing a lot of for the mass market, which is
I
Afrobeat?
they're playing local. They're playing like local. Like there's like the pop local, like Wizkid, Tiwa Savage, that could be perceived as alternative to some people who are like truly like into like the local scene. And so I definitely do agree with the fact that like, there must be regulations, because there's a lot of national music and adverts and like media really that you see and you hear, but I don't know if the alternative scene gets that much play. There are certain radio stations that do dedicate themselves to playing the new wave kind of alternative sound, but not as many. So
What's your opinion on that? Do you feel like they're pushing alternative music and other genres, or they, like Gigi mentioned, they're playing the Davidos and the Tiwas and the music that's already for the mass market?
yeah, they're definitely playing the music that's already for the mass market, but because like there's the percentage of youth in Nigeria, for instance, is a lot higher, like people under, I don't know, 30, there's more of the population within that category. And so in order for certain businesses and platforms and such to get the numbers and the traction that they need, then they do have to pitch to the younger scene and like the alter scene, as is labeled by the people who make labels, as I guess kind of like young hip, street style kind of like new wave, like alternative to the mass. They definitely have a voice and people are definitely like listening to them.
Fair enough. And I think Kabam's mentioned that, in just like having a discussion in business wise, we also need to kind of speak to the corporates about supporting other genres that would be much smaller than Afrobeat, which is, I wonder how that conversation would go, just because corporates are all about selling their products to the market. So um, I genuinely wonder how that conversation would go.
I think a lot
But
try and build their own platforms and media things and new labels to start from scratch, as the people who started their own Afrobeat programs from scratch and are like now doing their thing as they're getting more renowned. They can't just be expected to change direction all of a sudden, which is understandable. And so the new wave is building its own, surfboard to carry itself to the shores.
100, and we're here for it.
Okay,
And
so just if I can just mention, so I think it's a feasible, I think it's a possible conversation that can happen. My 9 to 5 in a lot of cases is actually cutting commercials for corporates, and these are conversations that we're constantly having. And I realized that even the reception to Afrobeats and the way a lot of us, the way corporates actually process and reward artists in the Afrobeat space is more reactionary than intelligent. Reactionary in the sense that they know that this thing is picking up steam, and because of that they want to get the youth, just like Gigi has said, and so they go in there and they support. But what I'm saying is, so the alter space, for instance, has been able to show us that you can shift the tide. And I think that, whatever it is that these people do to shift the tide, whatever it is, culture is constantly changing. And yes, we might maybe call it Afrobeats in the general sense or whatever, but the sound can change. The music can change because culture always gives room for that. And, Altair, for instance, has been able to prove that. Amapiano filtering into Nigeria, for instance, and really taking over the Nigerian music scene in many ways has also been able to prove that. So I think it's about sort of connecting with the people that matter in some of these spaces and getting them to realize that, look, this is the new genre, this is the new sound, this is a thing that is so, it's that's why I said initially that it has to be deliberate. It has to be intentional. So artists need to sort of either move away from just, continue to be artists and continue to, grow the art form. But, there's room for music business, and music business needs to engage with corporate on this level, to promote. So imagine, whoever chooses to invest in Altair in the Nigerian space, imagine a telco investing in Altair in the Nigerian space right now and collaborating with an important enough gatekeeper. They're able to make, because Afrobeat in the Nigerian space, for instance, became what it is because certain radio stations and certain gatekeepers invested in giving it airtime and heavy rotation at a certain point. So I think that these are some of the things that can be managed. Yes, it's mass market, and these people just want to sell their stuff, but they're only reacting more than anything else. A lot of them are not doing the necessary studies and the intelligence reports to guide their decision as much as they're following what the next man is doing. And I feel that if people in the music business space can get involved and begin to have some of these conversations, we can actually influence other genres and give them time of day.
100, I agree with you. And I think we've seen at least UBA work with Borge and TZ and Fresh L, and I think that to me was the first corporate that I saw work with what Gigi mentioned as Altair Sounds, and we always just lead a first for someone to try, and everyone follows suit. I think my question to you, Ninel, is the same question, how it is in South Africa in terms of mainstream media in South Africa supporting other genres. Because I know hip hop is really big in South Africa, and now piano is really big in South Africa. I know there's other artists like Zahara or Lady Zamar. Are they being played as much? Are other genres being played as much as well?
Yeah, I think I agree with what Kawam said earlier. You put it nicely when you said that culture can change and evolve. And I think we see that all the time with trends in music and art. A couple of years ago, at some point, hip hop was considered niche, and then it went on to become the most dominant, most influential genre of music worldwide, then influencing into pop culture. And I think the same can happen to any other new genre. I think it does take some key things to make that happen, to create such an impactful story. I think the ambassadors of the music is one thing. So the artists that are headlining that genre, and I think that people follow and gravitate towards that, spread it worldwide. And they do that wherever they perform, wherever they show, wherever they play. In South Africa, radio is still very influential in pushing the impact of an artist. The only exception would probably be Amapiano, which I think really only got to radio afterwards, after it was already popular in clubs and venues and parties. And yeah, I think just as, the new radio, DSPs, play a very important role in stretching the influence of the artist outside of the local community, bigger. And those verified, those major playlists that you were talking about are important. We can see that when we go into the back end of any of the artists, and why we get excited about getting an ad to an international playlist, because we know it's stretching us outside of our local community, the home audience, and taking the music further. Media in general, I think, even outside of radio, they shape the story, they shape the narrative of how these genres are viewed. When we get an article on OK African, it says certain things, or music in Africa, we know that who that's going out to and who the audience is. And that's how they're going to read about it, and they're going to discover more. So yeah, I would say there's definitely a few important platforms in driving the impact of a genre forward. In South Africa, they'd be, I think, very similar. I don't know if radio is still as important in the rest of the continent. There is a play to play more local music. There has been for many years. For the most part, I don't think it's quite at the high levels that it could and should be. I think you got to have usually some good radio champions, compilers in the radio stations that enjoy the music and that sort of want to get behind it. It still is important, though. It's important when you're, in South Africa, for the South African Music Awards, for example. That's one of the things that they would look at. They literally look at the radio play for a period of a year in order to justify what was the most popular song in the country for the year. And that's actually interesting, because this year at the South African Music Awards, Amapiano will be a category on its own for the first time. And, it had one of the highest entry rates compared to some of the other more popular genres that used to be dominant in South Africa. So it's just showing us what we were really seeing, obviously, as a trend. And that didn't come without debate, eh? That came with a lot of debate. The South African Music Awards Committee, which is made up by most of the labels in South Africa, you know, it was a back and forth whether or not it was going to be a genre that would be here to stay, whether or not all those factors that we've been discussing now. But the fact that it made it onto its own list, which means that artists in that genre in South Africa will be recognized according to that genre and not be boxed under a broader category or anything like that.
Word. And now that we're talking about radio and media, the question I really wanted to ask is how you think streaming platforms have changed the process of making and sharing music, and and just like has it been easier for artists to break through with just access to more streaming platforms and essentially just kind of democratizing the process?
Yeah, I mean, streaming platforms right now are everything for music sales. Our last chain and franchise of physical music CD stores has announced its closure a couple of months ago. So by April, there'll be very few places to go and buy physical CDs. So, I mean, it's people are trying to come up with innovative solutions of how we can still print and still distribute around the country. I hope there will be, because I think in certain genres, especially R&B and Afro soul, we were still seeing some good sales. But no, streaming and digital music is everything for all of the artists. Does it make breaking an artist easier? Yes and no. I think, yes, the music is easier to create, record, and push out. But we face all of the same factors. We face competition. There are many more artists. There's a shorter, attention span. I think for music right now, you can see that with the lengths of songs being reduced to really, really short time periods. You get onto a list on a Friday, a new Music Friday list, and the next week you're gone. So I think there's a shorter cycle to the music oftentimes. And these are just some of the things that I think you have to work within as a recording artist and as a label, because we know it's like that, and it's like that for everyone. So it's created a lot of good opportunities. It is great that we can get onto a list and see we've got people listening in Tokyo and Germany and other places we haven't even physically been yet or been on radio on yet. But it does come with its own set of challenges that I think relate back to competition. Yeah.
Competition is good. Healthy competition.
Healthy competition is good, and hopefully the best rise to the top. I also think that streaming platforms play a major role in championing artists and genres. I think, and I think that there's a lot happening right now around finding rising artists, new artists, breaking artists, new wave, to offer something new and something fresh, and to put those artists on in categories where more established artists, have probably been owning the covers of playlists and so forth. So, I mean, the work that I think is going into, and probably the internal conversation, Charlotte, that you guys have, are really important, and they can have a very big impact on breaking that artist. So in the artist's career.
I got you. Gigi, my question to you, Gigi, is first of all, how has music streaming platforms helped or affected your career, and because your sound is very unique, is it African influenced? Yeah, those two questions, Gigi.
How have the music platforms impacted or affected my music?
Or your career, like the trajectory of your career?
As Cobham said earlier, it is a numbers game, and that is something that is looked at by prospective partners and people coming with offers and whatnot. And so it does mean that it's like constantly, I don't know, it makes stuff very number based, if that makes any sense to you. By the tone of my voice, it is a subject that is tiresome for somebody who has dyscalculia, but not in a sense that I'm saying that it is boring, but in a sense that it is complex. It's interesting because the more they increase, the more other things increase. But at the same time, if you just don't really pay too much attention to it, and then you give yourself the time to step back and decide what you want to do next, and decide that you don't want to be paying attention to the numbers on the screen as much as you want to be paying attention to what you're expressing and the true nature of your project and your message and your vision, then it takes it takes a step back. You take a step back from that. And what was your next question? I forgot.
My next question is your sound, does it have African influences? Like does Hello the Rock encapsulate that alternative wave as well?
When African influences, in the sense that influenced by the energy of the city of Lagos, for instance, or of the people, of the vibes when you're out and about, of that which drives like the city, which is a completely different sort of place. I'm sure everybody thinks wherever they live, wherever they come from, is like unlike anywhere else, but like Lagos is truly just like very much itself. And so from that energy, you get the song Wahala on the Rocks, for instance, and other aspects of the pace, of what people gravitate towards, what people care about, that kind of thing influences, not necessarily the music of the mainstream. That might have some influences to a certain extent, but I think that definitely with like the writing and with the energy of the song, again, I keep saying energy, but that really is it is like a battery pack, Lagos.
Okay, fair enough. I mean, a lot of things that we do are always like highly influenced by our environment or the environment that we come from. We're coming to the final stages of this conversation, this very happy conversation. I know you guys are very sad to hear my voice for the last minutes, but Kabams, I think final question for you is, do you mind, you did mention that you're working on a project. Do you mind, sharing more details, like when it's going to come out, what we should expect, or,
So yes, thank you very much. I'm very happy to share details. It's probably the most adventurous thing I've ever done. So I've been known to create a lot of alternative sounds, with the likes of Asha and Bez, and I've worked with Somi, who's American Ugandan artist out of New York, and we've made, like, she was actually nominated for Best Female Jazz Vocalist at the last concluded Grammys. But this is different. This is it's a project titled With Love from Lagos, which is intrinsically Afrobeats. But so I started out primarily as a music producer, but I've always sort of performed, and I have grown over years and just painstaking efforts to begin to accommodate my voice. I started out hating it very much, but now that I'm beginning to get used to it, I've now created this collaborative album that has a lot of people. So from Tubaba to Fowls to Simi to Bella Shmurda, who's like the in thing, the sensation, the reigning sensation in Nigeria right now, to Yemi Alade, Toke Makinwa, who's actually a fashionista in the Nigerian space, but I was able to get her into the studio to actually sing. And then I'm also looking at crossing outside of Nigeria and working with them, collaborating with a number of brothers and sisters who I have worked with over time and have developed a relationship with. So the likes of South Sea Soul, and possibly King Promise or Jackie out of Ghana, and just the like. So it's a very exciting project, and I think it chronicles. I don't know if chronicles is the word, but it just sort of puts out there just my time of working with amazing Nigerian. I've worked with musicians out of at the very least maybe 30 countries out of Africa or more. And it's just been, the camaraderie, the beauty of just, relating with these people and creating music that, always speaks towards one cause, or another in the interest of, Africans. So to be able to come together with all of these people and create, one collaborative album project, I am really, really excited about it. It's unlike anything, I've done. And I'm excited that, it's my album project. It's my voice. I can't tell you exactly when it would come out, not because I don't have that information, but we're just sort of managing that. I can say that the first single should be out in another month or so, and it's going to have Bella Shmurda and Pato Ranking on it. He's kind of big in the Nigerian space and also big in the Caribbean. Amazing artist. So yeah, that's what I'm working on. Among other things, I just finished recording an album for Banky W, who's also a Nigerian artist. I'm working with Timmy Dakolo, who got signed to Virgin Records. He's a talented, amazing artist. And then of course I'm doing all of my regular corporate work, sort of servicing, telcos like MTN and the likes and stuff. But yeah, those are some of the things, I'm currently up to, and just looking forward to, the offerings from some of those that will be out soon.
And look, we're looking forward to it. And sidebar, we're looking forward to having the album on Audiomack. But like we're looking forward to your work, essentially. And I want to wish you all the best. But I know that you don't need it because you are awesome and amazing.
Trust me, I need it, and thank you for the best wishes.
Over to you. What do we expect from your record label?
So I mean, for us, actually, we're really focused. I think that the greatest work that's going to come out of the continent and go international is going to be collaborations between great African artists. And so I love what you've just described about your project, Kobams. I can't wait to hear it since it's already done. And for the next one, please, I invite you to let us know when you have beats or when you're interested in collaborations for any of the artists on our label.
I will take you up on that. Thank you.
Yeah, we'd love to hear and see what happens when, you never know. When two artists get together, when there's a great energy, it really does create sometimes something very magical. And yeah, we're releasing a lot of music. One of our, Ami Faku, who was the best female artist last year at the South African Music Awards. She was also on the Obama favorite list for 2020. We're working on her follow-up project, which will be released soon. Manu Wallstar, who's Congolese, South African artist we're working with. We'll be releasing a lot of new work with him. And that'll take us with 2 collaborations with artists from East Africa and TZ, and some artists in Ghana that we're working with as well, and even Zambia and some Southern African artists as well. Benny Afro, we're also working on a brand new project. That would be our breaking artist, I think, for the year. And there's a lot. Keke Lingo, we're incubating a number of rising Amapiano artists at the moment. We've released a few singles, and there's a few projects that are coming soon. Yeah, guys, just here from Pretoria that are in the genre that just want to put out good music. So yeah, there'll be a lot of music coming out from the 5th season in 2021.
I love hearing this. I think what I have loved hearing from both you and Kobams is the word collaboration, and especially just from different artists from different parts of the continent. I think that before we even say we want to make these kind of genres global, we kind of just have to make them continental in the first place. And the best way to do that is by having more collaborations. Well, ladies and one gentleman, I appreciate you for taking the time to speak with us on The Wave. Until next time.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having us.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of The Wave. Found out more about the series on our social media accounts.
We are the wave, reaching out to the skies, Africa rising, burning like on the stars. We are the wave, we tell the stories of life. tell the story